You are listening to Meet the Thriller Author, the podcast where I interview writers of mysteries, thrillers, and suspense novels. I'm your host, Alan Peterson, and this is episode number 55. For this episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing internationally best-selling author Tess Gerritsen. Tess Gerritsen took an unusual route to a writing career. She's a graduate of Stanford University, and Tess went on to medical school at the University of California in San Francisco, which is about a few miles from where I'm recording this right now. And she was awarded her MD at UCSF, and it was while on maternity leave from her work as a physician that she began to write fiction. In 1987, her first novel was published, Call After Midnight, a romantic thriller, which was followed by 8 more romantic suspense novels. She also wrote a screenplay, Adrift, which aired as a 1993 CBS Movie of the Week starring Kate Jackson. Tess's first medical thriller, Harvest, was released in hardcover in 1996, and it marked her debut on the New York Times bestseller list. After several best-selling standalone medical thrillers, Tess Gerritsen created one of the most memorable teams in crime fiction: Boston PD, Jane Rizzoli, and medical examiner Maura Isles, which inspired the hit television series Rizzoli and Isles, starring Angie Harmon and Sasha Alexander. Gerritsen returns with her highly anticipated new novel, I Know a Secret, which is now available. I've now read 2 chapters. It's starting out great, so I'm looking forward to getting back to reading that after I record this intro. It's an edge of your seat read and a crime case steeped in unsettling rituals. No Secret is classic Gerritsen. It has authentic medical details. It's been a gripping read with characters that you care about. It's a continuation of her Rizzoli and Isles series, so I was very excited to have a new Rizzoli and Isles book out. Publisher Weekly has dubbed her the medical suspense queen, and so I'm very excited to bring you this interview where we talk about her writing process, the hit TV show that ran for 7 seasons based on her characters, about her Inception-like cameo on Rizzoli and Isles, and a lot more. So stay tuned for episode number 55 with Tess Gerritsen. Hey everybody, Alan Peterson here, and on Skype I have the internationally best-selling author, Tess Gerritsen, and very excited to talk to her. How are you doing, Tess, this morning?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day in Maine.
From your bio, now you graduated from Stanford University, and you studied medical school here in San Francisco. So do you have any fond memories of the San Francisco Bay Area?
Oh my gosh, San Francisco was like the best place to be when you're young. Great restaurants and so much happening, and just a fun city.
And did you start to get your writing ideas here, or did that come later on?
Well, I was writing since I was 7 years old. So even before I started medical school, I thought of myself as a storyteller. I just didn't think anybody could make a living at it.
Yes. Oh, yeah. So, medical school is probably more of a sure thing if you can get through it.
Yeah, right. I mean, once you're admitted to medical school, unless you really mess up, you're probably going to be called doctor.
And so, were you a fan of thrillers as a reader before you started to write them? Is that why when you decided to write, that you went to the thriller genre?
Well, I was a big fan of mysteries. I mean, when I grew up, it was Nancy Drew. Girls just read Nancy Drew. And then I also loved Gothic suspense, which is usually, a scary house and a woman trapped there. And so I think I was always attracted to murder mysteries. I just didn't really think of myself as a thriller writer until I wrote my first medical thriller.
Yeah, and you started with romantic thrillers. I saw that in your bio. I didn't know that. What made you make the transition from romantic thrillers to medical thrillers?
So I was doing romantic thrillers because one of my patients introduced me to the romance genre, and I really enjoyed reading romantic suspense. So of course, you write what you love to read, and I did 9 of those. But then I had a conversation with a homicide detective who told me this really harrowing thing that he'd learned while he was in Moscow. He was told by the police there that they thought children were disappearing from the streets, being kidnapped, and sent off to be organ donors, cut open and their organs harvested for rich people. So I'm a mom, and that really horrified me. And I thought, after a couple of weeks of sort of thinking about this, wow, that's a great topic for a thriller novel. And that's where my first book, Harvest, my first medical thriller, Harvest, came about. It was, I think, truly the first thriller that I've ever written, and it was the first time I used medicine. I mean, I'm a doctor, but it was the first time I really used medicine in a book.
Even though you had the medical background, did you still have to do a lot of research that went into doing that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm in internal medicine, and Harvest was really about cardiothoracic surgeons. So I did have to learn a lot more about surgical technique. I had to learn more about, especially the way organs are matched to recipients. I mean, that was something I had to do some research into. But a lot of the medicine, of course, I already knew. It's funny that I had not used medicine. I used to think that medicine was kind of not all that interesting, but that's because I did it every day.
Yeah.
And then later on, people said, "I love the medical details." And I thought, really, that's just kind of like a work day for me. So I learned from that. The people really want to know secrets. They want the inside scoop on an occupation they don't have access to.
Yeah, that's what makes it so much fun to read. Because it's like for readers, it's like discovering a whole new world.
Yeah, I mean, you learn how doctors think. You learn how they approach an issue. I mean, when so you're given a sick patient. How does a doctor, approach that patient? How do they go through this process of eliminating what it can't be and what will it be? So learning the way doctors approach problems, how they think. The things they don't want you to know. For instance, there are some patients we hate. There are some patients we just don't want to see. But that's not something a doctor's not going to tell you, and you can find that out in fiction.
Were you practicing medicine while you were writing these books at the same time?
No, my first two books I was practicing part-time. I really left medicine because I just could not find childcare for my babies. My husband is a doctor as well, and there were nights when we would both get called into the hospital in the middle of the night, and we have two sleeping babies at home. What do you do? What do you do? You can't call somebody at 3 a.m. and say, "Can you come over and watch my kid?" So it got to be so stressful that I said, "I'm going to stay home for a while and write stories the way I've always wanted to."
So you say you started writing since you were 7. So it's always been something you wanted to do, but you just didn't think you could make a living from it.
Well, that's what my father told me. I come from very conservative Asian American parents, and for them, as with many people that are immigrants or close to having been immigrants, security is everything. And in the United States, for Asians, security means a career in the sciences, engineering, medicine, physics, things like that, computers. And my father wanted me to have a secure career, so that's why he pushed me into medical school.
In a medical thriller, the protagonist is usually a doctor. Is that the
a doctor or a nurse, somebody in the medical profession?
Oh, okay. Because then, of course, your Rizzoli and Isles, Maura Isles is a doctor, a medical examiner, but that's more considered a crime fiction. Then would be the difference between those two.
Yeah, I think the difference between a medical thriller and other thrillers is that the heart of the medical thriller has to do with either medicine or medical ethical questions. So, and a lot of it takes place in the hospital, and it really has to do with the work that doctors do.
And so, did you put any parts of your personality into Rizzoli and Isles, or both of them, or just one of them?
Oh, yeah, just one of them.
Oh, interesting.
Jane Rizzoli, I interviewed a couple of women cops prior to writing The Surgeon, which was the first Rizzoli and Isles, the first Rizzoli book. And I came away with the impression that they were hard-charging women. They were smart alecky, and they complained about how they were treated as women. Here they are, cops, and yet they are fighting for respect every day. And so that part of the personality went into Jane. Jane was fighting for respect in the first book. Maura Isles, being a medical professional, I sort of grafted myself into her. She believes in science. She wants a logical explanation for everything. She wants to be able to explain the inexplainable. And there's a lot of that in this world. Mm-hmm. So That was me, and that really is me. Whenever somebody says this weird thing happened, I always want to know, well, why did that happen, and what were the events that led up to this happening? So yes, she's very much me.
Yes, I was trying to think back about that. So the first book, the first Rizzoli and Isles book, did it feature Isles at all, or?
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, The Surgeon was a one-off, or it was meant to be a one-off. It was meant to be a book really focusing on another heroine named Catherine Cordell, who is a surgeon. And Jane Rizzoli was just a minor character. She was the partner of the lead detective, Thomas. And I had every intention of killing Jane in that book. She was supposed to die in that story. I sort of had her death planned out. But she started to grow on me as a character. I began to like her, even though she was at heart unlikable. And by the end of the story, when she was supposed to die, I couldn't do it. She survived me. And I thought, well, what happens to her next? She's so interesting. What happens to this prickly, hard driving woman? And so I wrote the second book, which was The Apprentice. And in that book, I introduced a secondary character. Maura Isles was just a medical examiner. And eventually, after 12 books, they become really close friends.
Yeah, that's an aspect that I really enjoy of your books is the Rizzoli and Isles books is how they get along and how it's changed through the books. But I remember reading it, and it was so cool because like Dr. Isles would explain things or describe things in very medical terms, and then Rizzoli would translate it for us in US
Right.
in street English.
Right, because you just had two doctors talking in real life. You wouldn't understand maybe a third of what they say. So Jane is sort of the every person. She's the every, she's the reader. She wants a translation.
So now with the TV show, of course, now whenever I'm talking about that, I just see the two actresses. How did that whole process work out? I mean, was it from the time that Hollywood came knocking on your door till it was on TV? Was it a pretty fast process, or did it take for a long time?
It was a pretty fast process. Now I have, I've sold stuff to Hollywood before. I think I've sold three other properties optioned them off. I sold two and I optioned one, and nothing ever happened with those stories. So I had gotten a pretty jaded view of Hollywood buys your stuff and then they go away and you never hear from them again. So when the book rights, the TV rights to Rizzoli and Isles were first optioned, I cashed the check and forgot about it, and I never really thought anything would happen. But a year later, they had a good script. They cast Angie Harmon as Jane Rizzoli, and it was like rails. That thing just went on, and it became top rated on TNT. And I was really sort of, my head was spinning by how fast, once it started happening, how fast it did happen.
Yeah, and it went with like 6-7 years it ran, over 100 episodes.
Seven seasons.
Seven seasons. That's amazing, yeah. And it was such a great show. And
it went out number one. I mean, it went out at the top of the ratings, and it was by every measure, it was a really big success as a TV show.
Yeah, it was a great show, and I was a fan of Angie Harmon from her Law and Order days too. So I remember when it came on, I'm like, oh, I'm going to watch that. And then, So, and I hadn't at that time I hadn't read your books yet. And then I went back and started reading your books. I'm like, hey, these are great. And I mean, they did a great job. The actresses did, but the characters in your books were a little, there was a little more different nuances. But after a while, once I started reading them after the show, I just kept seeing the actresses.
I know that. Unfortunately, there is a disconnect between the way Jane looks in the books, which is very ordinary, and she's short and she's not attractive, and then we have Angie Harmon playing her on television. So that was that, and then the same thing with Maura Isles. She's very different from the way she looks in the books, and I know some people have a hard time flipping back and forth. But I wanted to be very certain that my story stayed the way I first described them, because there are many readers who will never watch TV, and I didn't want to confuse them.
I must have missed this one. That you had a cameo on one of the episodes?
I did. The last season, it was really funny because I knew that it was ending. The showrunner emailed me and said, "Would you want to do a cameo?" I said, "Okay." I mean, I was a little nervous, and the part they wrote for me was so funny. The way the story it was moving is that Maura Isles is thinking of leaving the Emmys office and becoming a crime writer. So she goes to a convention of mystery authors, and there I am. And they ask her, hey, you want to meet Tess Gerritsen? She's a really well-known mystery writer. So yes, I play myself in this cameo, meeting my characters. It's really this, a story within a story.
Yeah, that's like a Inception kind of a thing.
Yeah, it is.
The character that you created is asking you about writing, and then you're going to write her later on.
Well, let me tell you that there's a twist of the Inception thing, which is I'm writing a crime novel now, which is not Rizzoli and Isles, and I'm thinking of publishing it under the name Maura Isles. So,
oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Now, yes, the TV character has become a crime writer, and now she's writing books, and I don't even have to change the author bio because it's pretty much a retired doctor that writes in Maine.
Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun. I've seen those. I can't remember Angela Lansbury's character on Murder, She Wrote, but I've seen her name on books.
Right, that's right. Yes,
yeah, Jessica Fletcher.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be great. So that's what you're working on now, and then your book, your latest book is a Rizzoli and Isles.
I Know a Secret.
And I just started reading it. I'm only on 2 chapters. I don't want to give too much away on that, but a lot of it's happening, especially on a personal level for Dr. Isles. Can you tell us a little bit about the plot and how you got the idea for it?
Well, way back in Body Double, which was book number 4, Maura Isles, who was an adopted baby, finds out about her birth parents. Her birth parents have always been a mystery to her, and now she finds out who her mother was or is. And it's a horrifying discovery because her mother was she was a murderer. She was a serial killer, and she's now serving lifetime sentence in prison. So Maura's relationship with this woman named Amalthea is really this mixture of, oh my God, that's my DNA in this woman, and oh my God, what does this mean about me? What kind of monster blood do I have in my own veins? So she finally sort of disconnected herself from this woman because she realized the woman was evil and manipulative, and she hasn't seen her in a couple of years. But now her mother is dying of cancer. So Maura feels this is her last chance to say goodbye to this woman, even though she despises her. And when she goes to see her in the hospital, her mother is still up to her old tricks and is manipulating Maura again and telling her, I know things that you don't know yet. You're gonna find another one. And Maura has no idea what this means, but pretty soon there is a dead body, and she wonders how much her mother knows.
Are you going to have more Rizzoli and Isles in the future, or what do you?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like I tied up a lot of emotional loose ends in I Know a Secret, and I don't think I need to write another one. I think I've answered all the questions that people had about what happens to these 2 women and their families and the people in their circle. And right now I'm working on some other projects. This other book that I'm working on, which is a thriller that may or may not involve a ghost. I'm doing a documentary film with my son about, this is weird, about the long history of pigs and humans, that relationship.
Oh, yeah.
The animal, the pig. And I'm working on a possible new television series, which I can't really talk too much about, but let's just say it's looking really good.
Oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. Yeah, you got a full plate.
Yeah, and here, I thought I was retiring. In fact, I didn't sign a new book contract because I thought I wanted to go into semi-retirement, and it's not working out that way at all.
Yeah, it doesn't sound that way. So now, when you're in the writing mode, I was kind of curious about your process. Do you did you outline your stories before you started to write them, or were you one of those authors that would just sits down and starts writing?
I don't outline my stories. Every time I've tried to do that, I just end up tearing up the outline and throwing it away. So, no, I'm really very much oh my God, that's a great idea. What happens next? And I just start writing. I have, kind of a mental map of where I'm going, but so often I'm taken by surprise. Middle of the story, it takes a left turn or spins around on itself. So I don't write an outline, and even if I have an idea, I don't stick to it. Because I like the story to surprise me.
Do you write like in the same spot, like a lucky spot, or is it just like an office? Or
yeah, I have an office. It's in my house. It's over the garage, and it looks out over the ocean, so I can't ask for a better spot.
Oh yeah, it's good spot to get some good inspiration going.
Yeah, I think the only thing that is probably keeping me from being more productive is the internet. So I should need to disconnect.
Yeah, I think I read that John Grisham said his office is unwired, disconnected.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Can you tell us a little bit about your medical thrillers were standalones, right? So you could go back and read those.
Yes.
Okay.
I had there was Harvest, Life Support, Bloodstream, Gravity, and The Bone Garden, which was sort of a historical medical thriller. And then those were the five.
Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our listeners?
Yeah, I think the great thing about being a writer is that you're free to explore any topic. And in the course of my career, I've done everything from medical thrillers to science fiction to historical. I mean, I did The Bone Garden took place in 1830s, and it was a look at early medicine. So it's a fantastic job because you can satisfy your curiosity wherever your curiosity takes you.
When you first started querying out, when you first got started, did that one get accepted, or do you have to go through the whole rejection?
No, I've been through rejection. My first two novels, I think of them as practice novels, did not find a home. But Call After Midnight, which was my first romantic suspense novel that got published, it sold over the transom. I mean, I sent it into Harlequin, and I sent it to an agent simultaneously, and they both responded simultaneously. So it was like, who knows what book is going to be the final book that sells. But it took me two unpublished manuscripts to really figure out what I was doing.
That's a good way of looking at it. Practice books.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I also learned, and it took me actually probably more books than that, is to get comfortable with your process. And my process is to write a really crappy first draft. I have learned that it's important for me not to stop and rewrite. It's really important to leave your editor, to shut your editor off, shut her up in a closet somewhere, and just play with the story. And then only after the first draft is finished do I go back and look at the flaws and then start to rewrite.
How many drafts do you usually write?
Well, yeah, generally 7.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that's because I have such bad first drafts. I have to go back and fix and fix and fix.
So that's good. That's great for listeners who are writing. Sometimes think, the first draft is so terrible. Well, usually it's supposed to be.
Yeah, well, you have to give yourself permission to write badly because nobody's ever going to see that draft. It's just you just sort of like put out the story and the story will change on you. I had a story called Vanish where it starts off with Maura Isles hears a noise in the morgue and she opens up a body bag and there's a body who's just come awake. The person is not really dead. So I was writing that first draft and it was a man in the body bag. And I got halfway through that story and I was bored. And I thought, why am I so bored with the story? And I realized that if it were a woman in the body bag, the story became much more interesting. And so I just kept on writing from that point on as if it had always been a woman in the bag from the beginning. And so if you looked at that first draft, you'd start off with a male character suddenly becomes a woman. And it would make no sense to you, but I just did it that way so I didn't have to go back and fix things.
Oh, so you just kept winning from there. Yeah, that's excellent.
Right, and then you go back and fix it. Yeah.
I also want to say, so when you're not writing, what are some of your hobbies?
Oh, I love to travel. I call myself a lifelong tourist. So yeah, I love to travel. I garden. I play the fiddle. In fact, my violin music became the center of one of my mysteries called Playing with Fire. And music was like that was the. Music became the reason for that story. So I think that writers really need to keep their curiosity alive and always follow your interests and always cultivate new interests because you never know what will end up in a story.
Well, that's great. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking your time for the interview. It's been so great talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a lot of fun, especially since I didn't have to have my face on it.
Yeah, I keep getting a lot about that because I guess videos are becoming so popular now, but I'm still more of an audio.
Yeah, well, I like not having to get made up and dressed up for this. I mean, you have no idea what I'm wearing right now. So.
Well, I'm glad you could do it in a more comfortable interview setting then. All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to your new projects.
Well, thanks a lot.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
For more information about Tess Gerritsen, head on out to her website at tessgerritsen.com. You'll find information there about her books, her background, her film and TV projects, and a lot of great stuff over there on her website, including an excerpt of her newest book, I Know a Secret, which is the Rizzoli Isles novel that we talked about during this interview. If you head on out to tessgerritsen.com, you can read an excerpt from I Know a Secret right from her website. Now, the book is, of course, available everywhere where they sell books, Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, iBooks, Target. And it's available, of course, in print as well as digital versions. So whichever way you prefer to read nowadays, you can have your way. And she's also available on Facebook and Twitter. If you go on those sites, look her up by her name, Tess Gerritsen, you'll be able to find her. And I'll have links to all this on my website. But if you're listening to the podcast, don't want to go over to my website, just type in tessgerritsen.com in your browser and you'll be there. I do want to ask you to please, if you have a moment to rate and review this podcast. It's a great way of getting the word out about the podcast, because that's what, especially on iTunes, which is the biggest podcasting directory, and that's how you get better placement on their podcasting directory if the more reviews and ratings the podcast has. So it'll only take a minute or two of your time to go over there and just hit the rating or do a little review. Would be much appreciated. So thank you for listening to this episode of Meet the Thriller Author, and until next time, I'll talk to you later.